The gorilla's fingers were already bleeding. Not from the python, from clawing at its own chest, trying to decide. The baby lion's eyes had rolled back. 20 seconds, maybe 30 before brain death. The python's coils tightened with the mechanical precision of a closing vise. And the silverback just stood there 3 feet away watching. Because here's what nobody tells you about nature. Mercy isn't instinct. It's a choice that breaks every rule. The lion cub's mother was dead somewhere in the ravine. The python was doing what pythons do. And this gorilla, this 400-pound male who'd killed before, who'd buried his own infant son just 6 weeks ago, had absolutely zero biological reason to care. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to where it all started. His name was Kiburi, which means pride in Swahili. The irony would become clear later. Kiburi wasn't the strongest silverback in the Virunga Highlands, and that was his problem. At 19, he should have been leading his own family group. Instead, he shadowed the edges of his birth troop, tolerated but not respected. His father had stopped acknowledging him months ago. The younger males sensed weakness like sharks sense blood. That morning started like any other, foraging in the bamboo thickets, avoiding eye contact, existing in the social purgatory between belonging and exile. Then the screaming started. Not gorilla screaming. Something else. High-pitched, desperate, wrong. It came from the ravine where the territorial borders blurred, that no-man's land where predators from different hierarchies sometimes crossed paths. Kiburi's troop moved away from the sound. Survival rule number 1. Unknown problems aren't your problems. If you're loving this already, hit that like button. This story gets even more intense. But Kiburi didn't follow. Have you ever been invisible so long you'd do anything to matter? Even something stupid? He moved toward the screaming. Down the slope, through the undergrowth, into the ravine where the morning mist still clung to the ground like cold breath. The smell hit him first, cat, lion. Then he saw it. The cub couldn't have been more than 8 weeks old. Alone. Impossibly alone. And wrapped in 12 feet of rock python that had started from the hindquarters and was working methodically toward the skull. The cub's eyes locked onto Kiburi's. Not the vacant stare of prey accepting death. Something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, hope, accusation. The python's head swiveled. Yellow eyes assessed this new variable. The calculation was instant. Gorilla equals threat. Gorilla also equals not prey. Therefore ignore gorilla. Kept squeezing. The cub's ribs creaked audibly. Its tiny mouth opened, and what came out wasn't a roar or even a proper scream. It was a sound Kiburi knew intimately. The sound of begging. Kiburi had heard that sound before. 6 weeks ago from his own son's throat. The infant had fallen from a tree. A stupid, preventable accident. The kind that happens when a distracted father isn't watching closely enough. Kiburi had carried the broken body for 2 days before finally burying it in the soft earth near the river. His mate hadn't looked at him since. The troop didn't blame him officially. They just stopped including him. Stopped trusting him. Stopped seeing him as anything but the gorilla who'd failed at the only job that mattered. He should walk away. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. Lions kill gorillas. Gorillas kill lions. The math of survival doesn't include altruism between apex predators. This cub's mother was probably dead. His pride scattered or slaughtered. Even if he saved it, then what? Cart it around like some interspecies charity case? The python coiled tighter. The cub's breathing went shallow. Rapid. Desperate. Kiburi took 1 step forward. The python struck at him. Not defensively, aggressively. It released the cub just enough to lunge at Kiburi's face with open jaws, fangs exposed. The message was clear. This prey is claimed, back off. And that's when Kiburi understood something the python didn't. He wasn't here to steal prey. His hand shot out, caught the python behind the head. The serpent's body immediately wrapped around his arm, his torso, constricting with the same mechanical force that had been crushing the cub. Pain shot through Kiburi's ribs. The muscles in his shoulder started screaming. But gorillas have something pythons don't account for. Thumbs. He grabbed the coils around the cub and pulled. The python responded by squeezing both of them harder. Kiburi's vision blurred. His chest compressed. He couldn't get air. This was a miscalculation, a fatal one, and he was going to die in this stupid ravine for a lion he didn't know. The cub bit the python. Not hard enough to damage, but strategically. Right behind Kiburi's grip, where the scales were thinnest. The python jerked reflexively, and in that half-second of loosened grip, Kiburi wrenched the coils apart. The cub tumbled free, gasped, coughed, lived. The python, now thoroughly annoyed and still wrapped around Kiburi's upper body, decided to commit to this new prey item. It was squeezing to kill now, not restrain. Kiburi's ears started ringing. His knees buckled. He looked at the cub, expecting it to run. Didn't. Comment, "I would run," or "I would stay below." I need to know what you're thinking right now. The cub limped forward on injured legs and did something that broke every natural law. It grabbed the python's tail in its teeth and pulled. A baby lion, helping a gorilla fight a snake. Kiburi had two choices, and both could get him killed. Let go and probably die, or commit fully to this insane alliance with a natural enemy. He chose violence. Kiburi roared. Not the warning call gorillas use for leopards. Not the dominance display his father used. Something new. Something between species. A sound that said, "I'm still here." He grabbed the python's midsection with both hands and twisted. Hard. The serpent's body spiraled around his grip, trying to find new purchase, new leverage. But the cub was still pulling from the other end, creating a tension the python couldn't adjust to. They were hunting it. Together. Predator and predator as prey. The python made its second mistake. It tried to escape. The moment it loosened its coils to flee, Kiburi grabbed it behind the head again. This time he didn't let go. He squeezed. The python thrashed, its body whipping against trees, against rocks, against both of them. The cub lost its grip and tumbled backward. For 15 seconds it was just Kiburi and the snake. Then the python went still. Not dead. Pythons don't die easily. But defeated. It understood the math had changed. This wasn't prey anymore. This was a threat willing to commit. Kiburi released it. The python slithered into the undergrowth, disappearing in seconds, abandoning its claimed meal rather than risk further damage. Silence. Just heavy breathing. Kiburi's ribs throbbed. His arm was already swelling where the constriction had cut off circulation. He'd have bruises for weeks. The cub sat 3 feet away, staring. Then it stood, walked toward him, and pressed its head against Kiburi's leg. Kiburi froze. This wasn't submission. Lions don't submit to gorillas. This was something else. Recognition. Acknowledgement. The kind of bond that forms when two creatures share violence against a common threat. The cub looked up at him with golden eyes and made a sound that wasn't quite a purr, wasn't quite a growl. Sounded like stay. "Yeah," Kiburi rumbled. "Now what?" The cub's stomach growled loud enough to answer. It hadn't eaten in probably 2 days. It was dehydrated, injured, and had the survival skills of a houseplant. Without its pride, it had maybe 48 hours before something else killed it. That's when Kiburi heard them. Through the trees. Coming down the ravine. His troop. Led by his father, the dominant silverback, with 6 other males. They'd heard his roar. They'd come to investigate. and they were staring at the scene with expressions that ranged from confusion to disgust. A young gorilla, standing over a lion cub, smelling like python blood and poor decisions. His father's voice was granite. "Step away from it." Kiburi didn't move. "It's a lion. It will grow. It will hunt. Step away." The cub pressed closer to Kiburi's leg. It didn't understand the language, but it understood the tone. Understood that these newcomers were not friends. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends, because what happens next will blow your mind. Kiburi's father took a step forward. The message was clear: obey or be exiled permanently. Have you ever had to choose between what's right and what's safe? Kiburi looked down at the cub, at this tiny, broken thing that had chosen to fight beside him instead of flee, that had trusted him despite every evolutionary reason not to. He thought of his own son, the one he'd failed, the one he'd never get back. He picked up the cub, not gently, not like carrying an infant, like claiming it, like declaring ownership. The cub squirmed once, then settled against his chest, its purr growl vibrating through his ribcage. Kiburi's father's expression went from anger to something worse. Disappointment. "Then you're no longer one of us." The other males encircled them, not attacking, exiling, the social equivalent of death for a gorilla. Kiburi had just sacrificed his family for a lion, and somehow, impossibly, he felt more himself than he had in months. The exile was immediate. No ceremony. No final goodbyes. The troop turned and moved up the ravine, back toward the bamboo thickets. Back to safety and structure and the rules that kept gorillas alive. Within 30 seconds, they were gone. Kiburi stood alone in the ravine with a lion cub and no plan. The cub looked up at him, blinked, made a questioning sound. "I don't know either," Kiburi admitted. Then he smelled it. Fresh, clothes, blood. He followed the scent up the opposite slope, the cub limping behind him. 50 meters through the undergrowth, he found her. The cub's mother. She was massive for a lioness. Still warm. The kill was recent, maybe 3 hours old. Not from the python. From something with teeth. Kiburi examined the wounds. Bite marks on the throat. Defensive injuries on the flanks. Another lion had done this. Not a rival pride. Same scent markers as the cub. This was internal. A coup or a challenge gone wrong. The cub had fled during the fight, gotten separated, and the python found it before the pride could regroup. The cub approached its mother's body. Sniffed. Made a sound like breaking glass. Kiburi watched, throat tight. He knew that sound. Had made it himself over his son's grave. Movement in the trees. Multiple shapes. Kiburi tensed, ready to grab the cub and run. 3 lionesses emerged from the undergrowth. Adults. Battle-scarred and exhausted. They stopped dead when they saw him. For 5 seconds, nobody moved. Then the largest lioness stepped forward. Her eyes went from Kiburi to the cub to the dead mother and back to Kiburi. The calculation playing across her face was visible. Why is a gorilla with our cub? Why is our cub alive? What happened here? The cub limped toward them. The lionesses tensed. One of them, younger with a torn ear, moved to intercept it. The cub turned back to Kiburi, not running to its pride, checking on him, like it wasn't sure who it belonged to anymore. The largest lioness growled, not threatening, confused. She looked at the dead python scales scattered on the ground, at Kiburi's injuries, at the cub, alive against impossible odds. She sat down. The other lionesses followed. This wasn't submission. This was acknowledgement. They understood what had happened here, even if it made no biological sense. Kiburi set the cub down gently, nudged it toward its pride. The cub resisted. dug its claws into the earth, looked back at him with those golden eyes. "Go," Kiburi said. "They're your family." The young lioness with the torn ear approached slowly. She was probably the cub's aunt or sister. She bent down and nuzzled the cub, making soft sounds of comfort and relief. The cub finally, reluctantly, moved toward them. The largest lioness stood, approached Kiburi directly, close enough that he could feel her breath, close enough to be a threat. She didn't attack. She bowed her head, just slightly, just enough. Then she led her pride away, the young lioness carrying the cub by its scruff. The cub looked back 3 times before they disappeared into the forest. Kiburi was alone again, more alone than before actually, exiled from his troop, separated from the one creature that had made him feel purposeful. His arm throbbed, his ribs ached. He had no plan, no direction, no future. He looked down at the dead lioness, at this mother who'd fought for her cub and lost. He'd won. The cub lived, and somehow that felt both triumphant and devastating. A sound behind him, footsteps. He turned, expecting his troop come back to punish him further. It was his father, alone. The old silverback approached slowly, stopped 5 feet away, stared at Kiburi with an expression that wasn't quite respect, wasn't quite forgiveness, but something between. "The python?" his father asked. "Gone." "The cub? Alive?" His father nodded. "You saved something that wanted to live." He paused. "Your son wanted to live too. You know that, right? It wasn't your fault." Kiburi's throat closed. He'd waited months to hear those words. "You're still exiled," his father continued. "But not because you failed. Because you chose something bigger than us." He turned to leave, then stopped. "That's not weakness, Kiburi. That's the opposite." Then he was gone, and Kiburi understood. Some prices are worth paying. 3 weeks later, researchers in the Virunga Highlands reported something unusual. A lone silverback gorilla, foraging on the territorial border between 2 regions. Not joining either troop, but not leaving either. And sometimes at dawn, a young lion cub would emerge from the tree line. They'd sit together for a few minutes, not touching, not interacting in any traditional way, just existing in each other's orbit. The researchers called it cross-species bonding.
Unlikely alliance.
Natural anomaly. They were wrong. It wasn't anomaly. It was choice. 2 creatures who'd shared violence and survival and decided the rules didn't have to apply. Kiburi eventually rejoined a troop. The cub grew into a strong juvenile, integrated into its pride. They saw each other maybe once a month after that. But the story isn't about them anymore. It's about the moment you decide that being kind is more important than being safe. That mercy isn't weakness. That the world doesn't have to work the way everyone says it does. If this story moved you, smash that like button. Comment mercy or survival. Your answer reveals more about you than you think. Subscribe and hit the bell, because stories like this need to be told. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Some bonds don't make sense until they're the only thing that does.